Hello, and welcome to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and today it's all reading treats at the Poison Pen as we welcome three wonderful cozy mystery authors, Raquel Reyes, Gretchen Rue, and Marilyn Levinson, who's here today under her pseudonym Allison Brook. Before we begin our conversation, I would like to let those tuning in know that the Poison Pen does have copies of all of the authors' new books, as well as their backlist, and we would be happy to hold copies for you at the bookstore to pick up or put them in the mail. Just give us a call at the Poison Pen or go online and we can connect you with these truly fabulous new books. Now I'd like to welcome Raquel, Gretchen, and I'll use Marilyn for this conversation.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
I'm so glad you could join us today. My first question for each of you is, can you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself before you became published writers? Who were you? And why don't we start with Raquel, because if I understand correctly, your childhood was like an episode of I Love Lucy.
Well, I say that because I'm Cuban American.
Okay.
My mother was definitely an American redhead, and my father's Cuban. And I Love Lucy reruns were very important to me because representation really does have a huge effect on you as you're growing up. And so the fact that I could see a family, like mine on TV was everything, definitely. So.
And where did you grow up?
I split my time between Georgia and Florida.
Oh.
So Miami. I mean, I consider myself Miami now, for sure. I've been here longer than any place else, but I spent a good bit of time, like summers, with my maternal grandparents in Georgia. So I can claim a little Southern.
There you go. What about you, Gretchen? Who was Gretchen before she became a writer?
Well, I'm born and raised Canadian. I've never lived anywhere except Winnipeg, Manitoba. So I'm very well versed in living in the deep cold, as opposed to Raquel, who gets to enjoy like the nice temperate weather all year. We hit -40 pretty regularly in the winter, which is the temperature I pick because it's the same in Celsius and Fahrenheit. So yeah, we're used to snow and cold. And I joke that it gives me a lot of time to sit inside and read. So aside from that, I have 2 university degrees. I've got an English major, which I joke I might be the only English major actually using my degree, and a history degree. So it means I really do enjoy research for whatever purpose. And that's pretty much it. So.
Marilyn, what about you?
Well, I'm a New York person. I was born in Brooklyn, where I lived for 14 and a half years. And I went to Syracuse University, and we moved to Long Island when I was 14. And I'm still on Long Island. I keep moving farther and farther east, and soon I'll get to Montauk. I was a Spanish teacher in my other life. And Raquel knows I have a very good friend, Raquel, who's also from Cuba. And I don't know, I've been writing for the last many years. So I started writing children's books, and now I'm writing I'm writing both, but mysteries mainly.
What was your initial path to publication like? And we'll start with you, Marilyn.
Well, okay. This was really a long time ago. I got to be very friendly with someone a woman who wrote all kinds of genres. Her name was Roberta Gellis. She's dead now.
Oh yeah.
And I wrote a romantic suspense first, and then I wrote a children's book. And she said, Marilyn, I think you really have that knack of writing children's books. So my first book that was published is called And Don't Bring Jeremy, which is still out. It's an ebook now. And I wrote children's books for a while, and now the last many years I've been writing mysteries. So it was just sending stuff out and typing. This was before computers, and you had to correct everything with the whiteout. And I finally got an agent, and she sold the book and the paperback rights. And so I thought, everything I write was going to be published. I had I was in PW, a picture from my book. There was only about 5 or 6 was in there, Well, I was rudely informed, this is not the case. Just because you sell a book does not mean everything that your little hand writes is going to be sold.
What about you, Gretchen? What was your initial path to publication like?
Well, my first book was published about 12 years ago. This is my first book as Gretchen Rue. I have about 26 others out as Sierra Dean. So I have written primarily in urban fantasy and contemporary romance before this. My first book that I ever finished writing was actually the first book I ever published, which I think is actually very, very rare in the case of most writers. I submitted it to agents, to publishers, to you name it. And I got really very lucky in that I was sending that book out right as the ebook boom of the early 2010s was reaching its peak. And I got in within a publisher called Sam Hain, who were huge at the time for ebook publication for romance. And I got very, very lucky because my book was initially passed on by one editor there, and she didn't just dismiss it, she passed it to another editor and said, I think this might be your cup of tea. And that editor loved it, which in hindsight, I think is astonishing because we had to change so much and it was so rough because it was the first book I ever published. And I've learned lots since then about, self-editing and making something ready for submission. But yeah, I definitely the same idea. You get published once and you're like, oh my God, this is great. Everything will be making it now. And I got very, very lucky with Sam Hain before they closed that they did take a ton of books from me. So I was able to publish a full series with them. Kind of get my name out there and find an audience, which was really, really great. But I certainly learned a lot when they closed because that's a lot of, hey, you have to get your rights back. Here's how you self-publish all your old titles. Here's all of that. So it was quite a roller coaster. So I've done quite a few different approaches now. The semi-traditional, because Sam Hain was a publisher, but they were a very small ebook first publisher. And now with Crooked Lane being, more traditional through, getting a box from Penguin Random House at your front door. And so it's the whole roller coaster. I've done them all.
Raquel, what about you?
Well, I have two books. The second in the Caribbean Kitchen series just came out. But I think I'm on my fourth or fifth anthology. I also write short stories, so I've got some stuff, and it's all happened really within the last year and a half. But I have been involved in writing organizations for 15 or 20 years. I always thought of myself as a writer. There's a picture of me in like an elementary school yearbook, winning a little creative writing award. I did poetry first, and my degree's in theater, so I did some playwriting and so forth and so on. I even I started my own magazine and got it distributed into 9 states. I only made it to 2 issues. I was working on the third one, still having the material for it. Then I ran out of money because, that's what, so I guess I could say that I was a self-published in my 20s or something. I don't know. But no, I've always been involved in it, but I haven't until this last year been given the opportunity to have my work published. So yeah, I definitely had those years of getting a lot of nibbles on manuscripts, but not going further than that. And many years of saying, okay, I'm just going to give up and I'll just be an advocate in the community. So, but then it happened this year and it's been great. Or I should say last year.
Let's turn to your new books. What can you tell us, Raquel, about Calypso, Corpses, and Cooking?
So it's book 2, and it starts out the week before Halloween and it ends with a Thanksgiving dinner. And I love that kind of, you get to experience a little bit of fall in Miami, which is different than maybe, most of the rest of the country, but it's super fun. You're going to follow my main character, who's Miriam Quinones. She is trained as a food anthropologist. But when when they move from New York back home to Miami, she's going to take a year off to be with her 4-year-old son. And her best friend gets her this opportunity at a Spanish language morning show doing a cooking bit. And so that was book one. And in book two, which is only a few months afterwards, she's like feels more comfortable in the in her new job and her new role. But then we have all this family life stuff. There's a fall festival. Her mother-in-law throws her into the last minute with 2 weeks to go to doing the menus for the big women's club gala. She ends up doing it with food trucks, which is really super fun. And then there's like murders, like I forgot how many corpses are in this one. I remember why there was an S on there.
Mhm.
There's some body count in book two, but it's cozy, not terrible, but yeah.
Gretchen, what can you tell us about Steeped to Death, which is the first in a new series?
Yeah, it's my first cozy mystery. It's a paranormal cozy. It's very light on the paranormal, which is kind of how I like it. So it's about Phoebe Winchester, who is just coming back to her aunt's small town of Raven Creek, Washington. Her aunt has just recently passed away from cancer, and they had a very special relationship with each other. And Phoebe had spent her summers at her aunt's place in Raven Creek, but hasn't been back in her adulthood. So she's just come off of a divorce. She was married for 10 years, was just divorced. And she kind of jokes to herself to keep it upbeat that she lost pretty much everything: husband, house, friends, because they were all his friends. And so this is kind of her opportunity to start from scratch. And so in addition to inheriting her aunt's beautiful old Victorian mansion, she also inherits her aunt's business, which is called the Earl's Study, and it is a tea shop / bookstore. So she gets to kind of fall into that central part of the community where she has a business to run and kind of has built-in friends in the people that are already working there and that knew her aunt. And because her aunt was such a beloved fixture in town, everybody kind of welcomes her with open arms, except for the terrible, dreadful town busybody Deirdre, who seems to only want information from her to buy her house. She's desperate to buy the house, which is connected to the murder, of course, but I won't say too much more about that. But in addition to inheriting the house and business, she also inherits a big, fat orange cat named Bob. And in the meantime, she's also kind of discovering that her aunt's reputation for maybe being a witch was also possibly not just a rumor, and that she might have her own magical powers.
Marilyn, what can you tell us about Dewey Decimated, which is the latest in your Haunted Library
Yes.
series?
Well, Dewey Decimated is the 6th book in my Haunted Library series. When I started this series, there were very few books, if any, out about libraries or paranormal. And I've had ghosts in a few of my other books. And my ghost appears very quickly because the setting is a library that is one of buildings that are 300 years built around a green in a small village in Connecticut. It's called Clover Ridge. And my sleuth is just under 30. And she has relatives in the town, and she's had a dysfunctional background, and she's staying with her great aunt and uncle, and she's just about to leave. She has a library degree, but they just give her books to reshelve and nothing like that. And she's offered a position in the first book when she's about to leave, and she becomes the head of events and programs. And it's a voice that tells her, don't be foolish, when she says, I'm going to leave. She's about to tell the head of the library, I'm leaving. And think about it. And so she stays on. And this voice belongs to Evelyn Havers, who is a witch. Not a witch. See, witches are catching on to me. She's a ghost. And she used to be an aide in the library. And so she gives Carrie advice, and she's sometimes very secretive, and Carrie would love to know who does her hair and where she keeps her clothing. So, there's a fun element. And Dewey's Decimated is the 6th book, and there's a building attached to the library, and this has been bought and it's being renovated. And while they're renovating it, they come upon a body hidden away. So when they checked out everything, they had never found it. And when they break through, make the workers earlier than they were really supposed to make an arch to let have the two parts join. The ghost of this person whose body is there, and he comes into the library and he's disturbing people. Now, Evelyn is a very well-behaved ghost. Nobody can see Evelyn except Carrie and her 6-year-old, 5-year-old niece who tries to give her cookies. But this ghost is very disruptive. He brings like a hurricane of wind, and he's knocking down books, and people are getting concerned. So Carrie, and suddenly, thank goodness, Evelyn shows up, and they have to keep this ghost hidden away. He has no idea who he is, how he got there, who murdered him. And it turns out that he is the uncle of Carrie's fiance. And so Evelyn, they keep hiding him in different rooms that aren't being used, in the attic that's not used at all. And Dylan, who is Carrie's fiance, really doesn't want to have anything to do with his uncle. If he really disappointed him. It's somebody he was very much he admired very much when he was young. And as he got older, Dylan began to see the uncle was very irresponsible. He never had a job. He did a lot of crooked things. And so, now Carrie has to find out who murdered him, because Evelyn said, once we find out who murdered Alec, we'll be able to send him on his way. But when they find out, Evelyn gets the news from above that no, they have to find out something else, because that person is soon murdered. And so this is what happens. These two ghosts that are completely very different. And Evelyn, of course, will stay in the library, but they have to send Alec on his way. So that's what happens in that book, amongst wedding plans and things like that.
All three of your series are marketed as cozies by your publisher, Cozy Mysteries. How do you define a cozy mystery? What do you think are the key ingredients? And I'll throw it open to whoever wants to start.
I think the primary thing in a cozy, obviously, is that it's fairly G-rated in terms of sexual content, in terms of violence. I think it's something that I know my brother and sister-in-law were totally fine giving my 14-year-old niece to read my book. And I'm like, yeah, that's kosher. Like, it's an adult book, but the themes are not so dark that it couldn't be read by pretty much any age range, I think.
I'd go with PG though.
PG, I
Maybe
think.
Not G. Yeah, PG.
Yeah. I mean, I
because mine has a little cussing in it.
And I'm pretty good because of my other books, like my Sierra Dean books are chock-a-block full. Like I need to have.
Yes, I was told to come to the next morning by my editor. I think they give you a cozy feeling.
Yeah,
I think that's the important part of it. Readers like to identify with your characters. They feel, oh, I feel like Carrie's my friend, and they're happy to see. I'm very aware of her arc, which is why I'm finishing this series when I finish with book number 8, which I'm writing now, because I feel her arc of development has finished. And well, that's my personal feeling. And of course, there are animals. Carrie has a cat, which is a library cat, Smokey Joe. And I think the people get the sense that everyone in the town knows each other. I mean, there are murderers and victims, but mostly the people like each other and they have nice relationships.
Yeah, I think in most murder books, you wouldn't want to be in them. And I think that's the difference about a cozy, is that you would like to be in it as opposed to like a standard thriller.
Right. I mean, very character driven, very much community, that cast of characters. Like mine is set in a city, and I love city cozies. There's a couple of other authors who write cozies set in real cities that we all recognize, I like that because I think there are little towns and communities within larger things. Your little neighborhood is your community. So definitely on that. But also, I think, like in romance, you're guaranteed the happily ever after, right? Or the happily for now, right? And I think that's what makes a cozy read, that you know at the end of it, you're going to be like, oh, everybody's okay. Like you don't
Yes.
have to walk away with a bunch of anxiety.
Mhm.
Which
And
I
justice,
read thrillers and suspense.
Yeah.
So,
I do
you know,
too.
I don't mind that, but it's a different feeling.
Yes, I agree. And I do
You
too.
know?
That's funny. I think that justice is served at the end, and that's what readers like. And of course, coming up with an interesting ending is, challenging. You want to make it different from any other book that you wrote or anyone else has. So yes, and they are smiling at the end, and they want to read your next book. That's very important.
Raquel, you had written something that I found really insightful, and I was going to share it. You had said that the sleuth in a cozy traditional mystery is an insider-outsider. They have access but perspective. And I hadn't really
Mhm.
meditated or thought a lot about it, but that's very true. Can you kind of expand a little bit on that?
Goodness, you did your homework. I think that was for a crime rate. I think that was for the crime rates, or I forget who I wrote it for, but I was talking about the mother sleuth,
Mhm.
because my character in my book is a mother too. And so there is something about being that insider outsider, either, which is very much a trope of cozy mysteries, of somebody has been a member of this town but has gone away for a long time and then they're called back, right? So they have access to people, but because they haven't been there with all of the gossip and so forth and so on, they're a little removed to be able to look in and observe. And I think that's what makes your main character. And I think, if we went through most, I would hedge it when say like maybe 85% of main characters in cozies could fit that description. They've been away, they've come back, that they have connection, but for some reason they aren't in the inner circle, and it allows them to observe things. And that's where the sleuthing happens, is through the observation.
And they see something from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also helps them be a good kind of like an audience insert, because they're also often rediscovering things at the same time that the reader is, which makes them kind of a good proxy for the reader.
And they also get to do things that the cops can't do, because they get to know the people, and it's a different kind of a relationship, and they learn different facts.
Let's talk a little bit about the hook for your series, or the frame, whatever publishers like to call it. Most successful cozy mystery series need to have something that kind of ties them together. And each of you has kind of discovered something rather unique. Can you talk a little bit about that particular hook and why it spoke to you, why you chose it as an author? And I'll throw it open.
I mean, I'll go first.
Okay.
My character, I've already mentioned, she's a food anthropologist.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of people go, is that a real thing? And I'm like, yeah, it's a real thing. One of the main reasons I chose that is because I love the history of food. I love the examining why we eat something, or how it evolved. How did this plant get from here to there? Why is it prepared in this certain way? All of that, the cultural history that goes along with the meal, it's very interesting to me. And because I very much wanted it to be set in Miami and dealing with the Caribbean diaspora, it was something that I knew that I could continue to write over a series, because my own interest would be in there, so that I could bring those facts that, are just wonderful details that kind of keep bringing back. In the back of my book, there are recipes, and above each one is a couple of lines that I try to give you a little bit of the history of how this came to be, and where it came from, and so forth. Now, that said, I love food. I am very interested in being a food. I don't mind that I'm in the culinary cozy subgenre. I don't mind that at all. But I am not the recipe cook person, baker who does like, all of these things. I love those people, more power to them. But I also knew writing this that I could never keep up at that level. I can appreciate, but I'm not be doing that. So that was a little part of it. But mostly it was, that I was going to be able to talk about the things that I find really, really interesting about the Caribbean, how there's this sharedness of the Caribbean. I get to talk about the colonizers and the enslavement of Africans and how that changed the islands and the indigenous that are there. In book 3, I mentioned a lot of the Taino stuff. Those are things that are important to me and that I don't know have been in a cozy before. So I'm really grateful that I get to be the person who brings it to the cozy world.
I think for me, I obviously started in urban fantasy, so I've always liked to have an element of the paranormal coexisting with the real in the world that we know. And I liked the idea of having a story of a woman discovering herself and her magic, her literal magic, at a time when she felt like her whole life was falling apart. I think that it gives her something to learn and something new about herself. And it's such a kind of unique thing that I get to develop over several books, because when she comes into it, she has no idea she's a witch. She's never known herself to be magic. She's always kind of thought that witches were just new age hippies who really liked candles and incense. And she's now learning that there's kind of a difference between being a witch in like the garden hedge witch sense of the term and being a witch as in somebody who can actually do real magic. And I like systems where I get to world build even in a small way. And I think having paranormal options available to you, you get to decide, are ghosts real in this world with witches? Are these different things real in your world with witches? What are the parameters of magic and how do witches function? I go into really great detail as she starts to learn from another witch in her small town that like their gifts are not all the same, that every witch kind of has unique abilities to themselves, and that her natural gift is quite rare in that she can actually tweak probability. So she can change the way things will happen at certain times of her experience. So it's not just like, I rewatched Practical Magic on the weekend. It's not just, stirring your coffee without touching the spoon. It's lots of different kind of cool things. And I think that like there's tons of witches in cozies. Obviously it's not, the two go hand in hand so nicely together, I think. But I like being able to take my own twist on it. And like Raquel said, I definitely didn't go into it planning to write a recipe book. But I joked that the thing I love about writing a cozy is that I can spend 2 full pages describing avocado toast and nobody's going to get mad at me. And then my editor came back when I finished the book and said, you have to put recipes in this, right? Because I spent so much time describing food that I was like, oh no, that was not my plan at all. I just really like talking about food. Which has cascaded horribly because now I have a new series that will be coming out in 2 years that's entirely food-based. So I really shot myself in the foot, but in a really positive way. So.
Well, it's funny. I have a children's book about a witch and he learns all his powers. It's called Rufus and Magic Run Amok and it's coming out again. It had been out 20 years ago. Yeah, it was a children's choice. And I'm now writing a series about it. So I'm not getting away from witches either. But that said, I'm going into a ghost. And as I said, I've had other books with ghosts in it. And it's funny because once when I went to speak at a conference to an editor, and she said, drop the ghost. I guess she thought I just put the ghost in, just to have a ghost. And that wasn't the case at all. But getting back to how I started writing this series, my book centers around a library. And before COVID, I used to be at my library a lot. And my library has this very interesting garden. I mean, it's beautiful with lots of trees and paths. In fact, we've had author fairs out there. But this time I was sitting with friends on across the lawn. On the other side was some man was doing a drum. His whole program was drums, and he was fantastic. And the head of adult services came out, and she introduced him. And we have a very large library, and so she does that. But I have a very good friend who also works doing that. And I was watching him, and as I left, I said, you know, that would make a wonderful sleuth, not the drummer, the young, you know, the person who presented, because here you have a library in a small town. And I chose a town that I had been in once in Connecticut and I loved. And sometimes people can figure out what it was with the green. And I figured that I would like to make my sleuth not a librarian involved with books, but a librarian involved with events and programs, because this way you have both parts, you know, the people, your everyday people, you know, who you work with all the time, and you're constantly bringing in new people. You know, you can't keep killing off librarians. You have to get new supply of victims. And so I have such a wonderful a range of what I can do. In social, the social aspect of one book. In the third book, I bring in the fact, you know, when winter comes, a lot of people who are homeless, they're not allowed to spend the day where they're sleeping. They only can spend the night there. So they come to a warm place, and they very often come to the library. And very often, you know, they're noisy. You know, some of them have problems with drugs or mental illness. And so I tackled that issue. And because I don't feel, I'm asking you guys, I don't feel that I've ever been limited in what I've chosen to write about. Yeah, because yes, it's cozy, but I don't feel that we're limited in what we want to approach. And so I went ahead and did it, and each book is very different. And I have as I mentioned before, a library cat, and in one book he really solves a mystery. You know, so but he's a character, and he plays an important part. And the fact of bringing in a ghost, it just came naturally. And I have never really seen a ghost, but I think that I believe in that there are ghosts around. And I think that this is my tribute to them. And I think that's what it is.
I think you're correct, Marilyn, about cozies being able to touch upon real world issues. It's just how they do it that maybe your publisher's kind of criteria, or how they allow you to process that information in your stories. I'd like to have each of you talk a little bit about the process of writing a mystery, because I know it's different for each author, especially when it comes to mysteries. I'm fascinated because you need to have clues, you need to have suspects, you need to have red herrings. So if you're the type of writer that just sits down and lets the words flow, how does that work? So talk about the writing process.
I can start on that, because I had to start my 8th book in this series, and I got nervous because yes, she's going to get married, and yes, I spent a lot of time yesterday looking at gowns and looking at color. I couldn't believe how much time I was spending on this. But when I write, my books are rather complicated, and in the sense that I always start with 2 elements, 2 storylines, and I like them to come together somehow. And sometimes that's not very easy. So I have a group of friends. We've been together for about 20 years. And I feel comfortable, you know, asking them for assistance and now 3 of us now, what we do, and I think this is so great, at the end of each day, whatever we're writing, we just check in. Now we're constantly in communication during the day anyway, but we will check in. and there's no feeling of competition. There's no feeling of, well, I wrote 30 pages, 30 words. Well, I didn't write any words today. Well, I did such and such, so, but somehow it urges us on. And I ran by my ideas through my two friends who I check in with every day. And somehow after that, I was able to begin my story, start writing, and I'm up to page 19. So somehow it worked.
I don't know, I think for me, I'm not a plotter generally, which is very difficult to do when you're a mystery writer. Similarly, I like every book, I try to jot down 3 quick lines, and it's the 3 main stories of the book. And typically it's one is the murder. The second one is something very fluffy and light. Like in the second book in this series, it's Phoebe wants to open a satellite cat adoption center in the tea shop. And so she's become quite an obsessive cat mom, even though she never had cats before Bob. And then the other one is like, oh, here's a background story that we're going to get a little bit more information on. But I like to be able to continually check in and say, am I developing these 3 stories, even though the mystery is what people are in it for? So I'm like, I know I have to touch on these as we go. We can't lose these threads. And in terms of writing it as a mystery, I'm not going to lie, I often don't know who the killer is when I start the book. I almost always know who the victim is. And I usually, the way I structure it is I usually like to have at least 3 people who could be the killer. And I like to write a book in such a way that any of those 3 people feel like they could be the killer throughout the entire book. And then when I go back and do the edits, I can start peppering in little extra hints once I've solidified who that actual killer is, to steer it that way, but also to give those little tiny red herrings to make you feel like it could be those other 2 people too, because I think it's just an easy way to get around it when you are not a plotter and you don't have the whole thing perfectly sorted out, is to give yourself, okay, this is where I could tweak it at the end and make it different. But that's just kind of my process when it comes to mystery writing.
I think I'm a little bit similar. I am, I've heard it said a discovery writer or an intuitive writer. Both of those fit. I have a skeleton, structure that I know I don't plot it out. I kind of know setting. I kind of know who's going to be. I mean, I know who's going to be killed, but sometimes like the extra deaths I don't know about, like in book 2. Just sometimes I was like, oh, sure, we can get rid of them. But I think it's true. My 3 stories that I always have to check in on are the crime, of course, then family, and then career for her. And so I like to think of those family and career scenes as kind of rest scenes from the crime and sleuthing and so forth. And it kind of helps give a rhythm to the story, or at least I hope that there's a rhythm to the story to keep everyone, to keep readers interested. Because I think, we all have a number that we have to write to, and we have to get those words in and meet that word count for our publisher, which maybe I would write a little shorter than I write for this. But now that I've finished 3 of them, you just know, you kind of have it, you kind of feel it. You're
Yes.
like, okay,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, the first book I wrote in the series originally was 65,000 words when I finished it.
that's like the boom. Like,
Yeah,
oh
'cause I
yeah,
was
you
like-
want a story?
I
I can write
Googled, I'm
65.
like, how long do cozy mysteries have to be? And they're like 65,000. I'm like, done. And then I gave it to my publisher and they're like, we would like this to be about 80,000 words if you
Yeah.
don't mind. And
And-
I'm like, cool. And my most
Mine-
recent
yeah.
edit, like
Mine
maybe
come on,
90.
almost all come in now at 82, 83,
Yeah,
because
mine
I mean,
too.
I write a lot about her background and her family and her relationships. And I'm a great believer in secrets, and I love reading about them, and I love putting them in my books, because we're always curious about people, I feel, and secrets are just wonderful. So it's always fun to include those.
You've all been writing for a while now. If you could go back in time to when you were first starting out as a writer, what advice would you give yourself?
I think I would say, Marilyn, it will happen. You will, because I mean, I wrote books, I got published, I got nowhere. And then somehow Death Overdue, the first book in this series, got such acclaim. And I was laughing to myself and I'm thinking, why is this book any different? I don't know. It was was up for the a contemporary for the Agatha. It was a star. This as a choice of that. I was, why is this book? I don't know, but that's, I would tell myself, just keep doing it and don't get upset. I mean, I did keep doing it, but I could have done without the upsetness.
Yeah, I think really similarly, I think I would tell myself that all of the stuff that's going to make you cry and miserable all along the way and make you say, hey, this is stupid, I should just give this up, is to just keep doing it. It's, I think, every single author who has ever gotten published has also been rejected 1,000 times. And I think it's the ones who might have great stories but gave up after submitting it twice and hearing no twice, they never get to share those stories. And I think it's the perseverance. And I read Stephen King's On Writing when I was like 16, and he always said, keep a stack of your rejection letters on a nail on the wall. And I did that until I got my first book published. And now I don't. Now I just let myself feel miserable about a rejection letter for like 12 hours and I get over it and move on to the next day. It's a numbers game. I mean, the real truth of getting published is that you're going to get rejected a lot. And that's just because your book was not a good fit there with that agent, with that publisher. And
I had one just like your book. You don't know.
Yeah, you don't know the reason, you don't know. And the real reason is because you still have to find the right fit. And you only do that if you keep going. And I'm glad I did keep going and never gave up, because there were times I wanted to, and I wouldn't be, you know, like Marilyn said, with the Publisher's Weekly Review, with the Library Journal starred review, with the best reviewed book I've ever written. Suddenly out of, 27 books later, by not giving up. So.
I mean, I agree with all of that. I think, my circumstances a little bit different. Some of the maybe obstacles that I was dealing with were maybe a little different. I have always been very much about you need to be in organizations. It's part of that networking. It's part of the learning. I'm a co-chair for Sleuth Fest, which is a writers conference, so craft conference. Before I became co-chair, I was a regular old attendee, and taking all of those craft classes and learning all of those things and meeting all of those people and listening to other authors at various points in their career and what they were going through and so forth. I think it very much prepared me for looking at it as a long road, as the marathon. So do I have advice for my younger self? I mean, it's just keep on keeping on, like don't give up hope, and just trust that the work you're putting in will be rewarded at some point. And by work, sometimes I just mean the time, right? Like sometimes the time is how many craft classes you've taken online, or how much you volunteered at the library and you fell in love with the right section in the Dewey Decimal, right? And you've read all of that and you've learned all of that. And, there's something about it. If this is your path, just stay on it. And you're going to meet a lot of wonderful people along the way, and you're going to find your people too.
Let's talk a little bit about you as readers, because you're all writers of mysteries. What is the book or books or authors that got you hooked on the mystery and cozy genre?
Can I go? I'm going to go.
Sure.
So I was when I talked about how I would go visit my grandparents in the summer, there was a Carnegie Library there in their small town, and it was fabulous. I just remember like the smell of like the old, oh, so great. Anyhow, so like I guess I read a couple of Agatha Christie books, but I was just like, okay, you know, the landed gentry are not my thing. Like it didn't connect with me. But then, like just a little bit over in section P was Elizabeth Peters. And I love archaeology, and I love the arts, and I love art history. So I loved Elizabeth Peters. I mean, the Egyptology ones were fine, but it was actually the other ones that I liked. And Seventh Sinner, I loved. It was in the catacombs under Rome, and I was like so in love with like the Italian Renaissance and all this other stuff and so forth. And then like in the like late 90s, I found Carolina Garcia Aguilera, who she writes a PI.
Yeah.
I think there were 4 or 5 of them in that series, and it was set in Miami, and she was a Cuban American. And I was like, oh, that just like spoke to me, and I love that. Some other ones are Donna Andrews. I loved all of her bird ones with the puns, which is still a series that's ongoing with Meg. But she had 3 that were just as the internet was getting going. And I loved those. I thought that they were so clever, and the way they use technology, and that was part of her sleuthing. And like, I really loved that one. And then one last one I'll give you is also from the early 2000s is Ailete. I don't know how to pronounce the first name. It's Waldman. Ailette Waldman. She did the baby series, the Mommy Track series, And I really love that one because she went into, it was in the city in LA, and she went into Orthodox communities. And I love that. And I mean, this is a theme with me. I love the cultural part of it. I loved how she could go in there and be the insider outsider and observe and comment. And so the reader was learning something. And I so appreciated the respect she gave to these, these micro communities that she was looking at. So yeah, I'm sorry, I gave you a list.
No, that's
a good list. I don't know. I think similarly, I started pretty young. I did hit the Agathas, and I still hit the Agathas real hard. I have a used bookstore near me that specializes in mystery fiction called Whodunit. And they are wonderful. If you're ever in Winnipeg, Whodunit Books, shout out. I spend way too much money there, so I'm paying for this shout out. But I pick up an Agatha Christie every time I'm in there, so I still obsessively collect and read them. And of course, Nancy Drew, when I was a kid, I think I just smuggled them in my backpack everywhere I went. And my mom was a single mom, so I spent a lot of time with her in the summers when she was working in her car, when she had to go on road trips to do work. And so I would just bring a stack of books like as tall as I was in the car, and that's where she would just leave me. I would sit there and I would read and I would read and I would read and I would read all the modern Nancy Drews and devour them. I think my real introduction to modern cozies was Ellie Alexander's Bake Shop Mysteries, which I adore. I really liked that it was kind of my first experience reading cozies with a younger heroine. I think the first kind of cozies I touched on were all kind of women in their 50s who were, surrounded by similar aged people. And I think for me, reading them in my 20s, it was a little harder for me to kind of connect with that. And Jules, who's the heroine of Ellie Alexander's Bake Shop Mysteries, was in her 30s, her late 20s, early 30s. And I was like, wait, so these books can, it's so stupid to say representation when I'm a white lady, but it was nice to see, my age
intersectionality,
yeah, kind of represented there. And I'm like, oh, wait, these books can be for me. This is really exciting. And I've picked up tons over the time, but it wasn't just cozies. I look at something like Laura Lippman's Tess Monahan books are huge for me. I love those books because she turns Baltimore into a small town somehow. And it's that same sense, like her aunt owns a little bookstore and it's very quirky, and those small town kind of characteristics get turned into it. And even though Tess is a PI and she gets her license and she does that, they do have a very cozy mystery vibe to them, just way more graphic, and they're like turned up to 11. But I really liked kind of this fish out of water sense that you got from Tess as a character, discovering how to solve a mystery, all with her like goofy, lovable Great Dane, and these characters that you kind of get to touch in on all the time. And I'm like, oh yeah, I could really, I really enjoy these worlds that these writers create. And so that's kind of what got me hooked on them in my 20s and into my 30s, and made me really want to write mysteries, because I find that even in my other fiction, I was always inserting a mystery because I really like that element of discovery and like that who did this and why did they do this. And I find that whenever there's a mystery to solve in any type of fiction, that it's a lot more enjoyable to me. So I'm like, why am I not just writing mysteries? Because it's clearly the genre I love the best. So yeah, it was a nice kind of discovery to learn that there was this perfect little niche genre that I could find my way into.
Yeah. Well, I started off pretty much the way you did, Nancy Drew, but I really must say I really preferred Judy Bolton and Trixie Belden books. And when I got older, I read Mary Stewart and Victoria Holt, which is another type of cozy. And I read Agatha Christie. In fact, being a teacher, I found with the second book that I wrote, a YA, I had discussions about books in my book, and I liked that. So I did that. I did that with a few books, but I wrote. I started the golden age of mystery books, and so my first book was Murder a la Christie, and while this sleuth is leading a sort of well, she's an outsider, but she's living in this wealthier community. And she's leading the book club. People in her group are being murdered as they're reading and discussing Agatha Christie's. And I did the same thing with Josephine Tey. So it's funny how whatever you were, there you were, a teacher, having been a teacher, it never gets away. And then later on, I started reading cozier books. What was her name? Goldie, that was one of the
Diane Mott Davidson.
Yes, I love those. And Denise Swanson, I loved her books, and I still do. And the Aunt Dimity books, which has that mystery element. So I do read a lot of them. I wish I had so much more time to read more of my friends' books. I mean, they're all good writers, and but I must, and I'm reading Osmond's new book. He's not a friend. The What With That Mist. I am an Anglophile. I will admit it. And Anthony Horowitz, I love his books. He's just so funny. And now it's on TV, so you can really see the difference. But I do sort of gravitate to psychological thrillers these days.
Yeah.
I said that about Alexander and the Landed Gentry, but I am a huge BritBox and Acorn watcher, and if anything that's on an island, so Shetland, love it. Put me on an island wherever that island is, and I'm there for it.
Yeah, anything British small town like Broadchurch.
Yes. Oh my
Broadchurch
God.
was great.
It's ripped.
Coastal too kind of had that like isolated island thing.
Absolutely.
It's a theme. I'm just saying.
It is. And did you read the guest list? That was a very good island book.
Foley.
Yeah, I love that book.
Sitting on my shelf.
I'm listening to more books, and I heard all of the the characters, and I just loved how they all fit in eventually. Oh my God, I thought that was brilliant.
Oh, I got to give one last, because I got Louise Penny's Armand Gamanche mysteries, just because it's the same idea as it's thriller, it's modern, like it's not cozy per se, but it is, right? Like it's,
Mhm.
you have this
Element.
small French town. Well, you're French Canadian. I'm
Mm.
Canadian, so I gotta, you know,
Luggage, yeah.
but it does, it gives you that, like, here are these characters, and but who could be the killer, and you kind of get to know all these people in this little town. And I think that there's something, you know, so special about coming back to that kind of same scene every time and being like, you know, surely we've run out of people who could die here. But you know, you never do.
I think they call it the Cabot Cove syndrome,
Yes, yeah.
what you're thinking. Before we run out of time, we do have some questions from some of your viewers. The first question for all of you ladies is, since Halloween is just around the corner, how do you plan on celebrating the holiday?
Oh, I've got, because I as growing up, obviously, you know, when you're a kid, you go for the candy. My ultimate goal in life has always been to be the full-size candy bar house. Like, I really like chose that as my mission. Like, I'm like, yeah, it's cool. My neighborhood doesn't get a ton of kids, so I'm not like really out of pocket on this. I really only recently in the past like 2 or 3 years learned how cheap it is to be the full-size candy bar house if you're really committed to it, because you can get them by the case. So I will be at a comic convention the weekend of Halloween, the Winnipeg Comic Convention, selling my books if anybody in Winnipeg is local and wants to come on down. But Halloween is a Monday this year, so I get very serious about decorating my yard with the things that I have. And I will be the full-size candy bar house. So very important to me.
The neighborhood that I live in, there are probably about 3 or 4 blocks that really go out and do lovely decorations and so forth. And a good number of schools are around. So we get a good mix of kids and so forth. So, I mean, I just enjoy the costume watching. And, you know, a few days before Halloween, where everybody's really got their stuff up, usually take a nighttime drive to see everything lit up. They do it for Christmas too, which is pretty great. I appreciate it. I don't want to know what their electric bills are, but you know, they really go. Actually, one of the scenes in my book where Miriam wakes up in the morning and she hears somebody scream. It's one of the joggers in the morning. She looks out in the yard and there's a body in front of the fake tombstone decoration that she had just put up. That is because one of those people on that street does one of those graveyard things, and all of the little tombstones are kind of like puns and, you know, funny things and so forth. So yeah, taken from real life, except the corpse part.
I must admit that at this point in my life, I really don't do very much for Halloween. I enjoy the costumes. I always love to see what my grandchildren are dressed in. They always have great costumes. The costumes are better every year, and you know, in general. And I love that Halloween's become such a big holiday. And I mean, I like writing this is the second book of my series where it's Halloween is coming up. In the first one, I have a costume, I have costume contest and a party, you know, for the adults actually. So, but now, and I don't even get that many children where I live, so it's just quieter.
We have a question for Gretchen. Someone wants to know what exactly Who's on Worst is.
Oh my God. Oh, that's a deep cut. I am a co-host of a podcast called Who's on Worst. It's part of the D-Rays Bay Podcast Network, which is the Tampa Bay Rays SB Nation site. Yeah, I know, Raquel, I'm a huge Rays fan.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So Who's on Worst is a podcast where we dissect bad baseball movies. So it's an entire podcast dedicated to
Very
more
niche,
than one.
very niche.
So many, you have
Okay.
no idea. We're at least, I think, 20 episodes deep, and I don't think we're gonna run out anytime soon. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We found some that were accidentally very good. And so we're definitely not anti every baseball movie, but so many of them are just dreadful. Wow, I don't know who asked that question, but nice deep cut. I appreciate that.
We do have one for Allison. This person wants to know, did your sleuth get her taste for avocados from you?
I guess so. I guess so. My grandmother used to give them to me when I was young, and she called them alligator pears. And I do love avocados. And in fact, at one point, my editor told me, Marilyn, you put it in too many times. And I've done that with a few meals because I don't have food. I don't, have recipes, but I do write about food a lot that they're eating, not necessarily making.
Another person would like to know from Raquel, if you could only take one Cuban dish with you to a deserted island, what would you take and why?
Well, it's not really a dish. It's what you get at one of the ventanitas. I call it my soul food, is croquetas. I love them. They're absolutely, I prefer the chicken croquetas homemade, but you can go to any ventanita and they always have croquetas de jamón, and they're always delicious. And yeah, it's comfort food. It's for sure my comfort food. So I would probably take that.
Now I'm hungry.
Can you each of you tell us a little bit, if you'd like, what's next for you as an author?
Oh yeah, sure.
I'll go real quick. Book 2's just come out. Next year will be book 3. Book 3 is going to be set in Puerto Rico. So just letting everybody know that. Bomba, Breadfruit, and Betrayal is the working title of that one. I had a short story that's just come out in Best American Mysteries and Suspense for this year, which comes out like any day now. It drops, and I have another short story coming out in Paranoia Blues, which it's all themed for Paul Simon, and I've got some other short story stuff going out. So that helps keep me interested. I'm never going to be the author that writes 2 book series at the same time. It's not how I write, but I love writing short stories while writing my series. So.
Well, speaking of being an author to write 2 series at the same time, the second book in the Witch's Brew series comes out next fall. It is called Death by a Thousand Sips. And that will be releasing, I'm not sure of the exact date yet. This one came out September, so I'm assuming probably September 2023. Book 3 has been contracted as well for fall 2024. And Crooked Lane actually just picked up the first book in a new second series, the Lucky Pie Diner series, which is about a woman who lives on a small island town in northern Michigan. It is not Mackinac Island, but it is very Mackinac Island flavored. I just haven't been to Mackinac, so I don't feel it's appropriate for me to write about a place that I haven't actually been. So fictionalized Michigan town it is. And her family diner has a bit of a magical secret to it, in that the lucky pies might actually be good luck, but certainly not for the gentleman who winds up dead on her doorstep. So that will be out in actually spring 2024. So I'll have 2 books out 2024. Okay. And ideally 2 ongoing series if those go well.
Well, my 7th book will come out. I have no idea what the name is because they usually choose their own after I give them many, or my friends someone will come up with a good title. So that's coming out October 3rd. And I just started writing the 8th book, which, as I said, will be the last one. And after that, I too am writing about an island, but it's like between Manhattan and Connecticut. but actually, I mean, I had this idea for this series a long, long time ago when I went to San Luis Islands, all the way on the other side. But I just rather write a place that I know better. And it's going to be completely different characters, completely different age, completely different animals, and I haven't decided whether or not to have a ghost in it or not. It will come about. And then, as I said, my Rufus and Magic Run Amok, that will be coming out in the spring. And then I really have the 2nd book written, which takes place on the Côte d'Azur. And the 3rd book is partly written, so it's a 4-book series. So even though I think I don't write 2 series, I sort of do, but I just try to think, I just couldn't write 2 mysteries at the same time. But I'm busy.
It sounds like it. Before we run out of time, can each of you remind us again about your new book and tell us how readers can learn more about you, what social media platforms you're on, websites? Why don't we start with you, Raquel?
I'm Latina Sleuths most places. I am on Instagram. I've just gotten on Book Talk and I'm having some fun. I'm talking about short stories and some books that I love over there. On Facebook, I'm Latina Sleuths. On Twitter, I'm Latina Sleuths. I'm latinasleuths.com. Yep. Just remember that.
Because I built all my socials when I was Sierra Dean primarily, all of my stuff is still mostly on Sierra Dean. GretchenRue.com will redirect you to SierraDean.com. I do have my own little subsection, but my Twitter handle Sierra Dean at Sierra Dean. My Instagram is at Sierra Dean Author. My Facebook is Sierra Dean Author. So any of those you can find me. I'm most active on Twitter. And then probably second most on Instagram. I've been getting way better at posting on Instagram more regularly and kind of keeping up with that account with a little bit more frequency. So I just like pictures more than anything else. So.
Well, I'm mostly on Facebook and I'm mostly there. I'm there really as Marilyn Levinson. Most everyone knows that Allison Brook is me. And that's the name of where I am on Facebook. And and my website is Marilyn Levinson, and I'm on Twitter as Allison Brook ML and also Marilyn Levinson, and Instagram, which I'm not on as much as I am on Facebook.
Well, that's been the quickest hour I've ever experienced with three delightful authors, Raquel, Gretchen, and Marilyn Allison. I'd like to thank them for taking time to visit the Poison Pen virtually, for writing such truly wonderful books. I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.